Philistines, remember when we were down in Caesarea, off the coast of the Mediterranean was an island of Crete, and these Philistines came and they settled in the 5 Philistine cities that were along the Mediterranean. And we went by them: Ashdod, Akron, and then Gaza. And so they were there. So what happened is the tribe of Dan, that was their area. But they were always fighting these Philistines. So what we see here in Judges chapter 18, that the tribe of Dan was seeking an inheritance for itself. They didn't like what God gave them. Okay, so what they did is they sent guys out and said, guys, go find a good place for us to stay. We don't like this place that the Lord allotted for us. So the children of Dan sent 5 men, verse 2, men of their families, from their territories, men of valor from Zorah and Ashdod, to spy out the land and to search it. And they said to them, go search the land. And they went to the mountains of Ephraim, to the house of Micah, and lodged there. And while they were in the house of Micah, they recognized the voice of the young Levite. They turned aside and said to him, who brought you up here? And what are you doing in this place? What do you have here? And he said to them, thus so Micah did for me, and has hired me, and I have become the priest. So they said to him, please inquire of the Lord, that we may know whether they're on our journey on which we may go and be prosperous. And the priest said to them, go in peace, and the presence of the Lord be with you on your way. So the 5 men departed and went to Laish, and they saw the people who were there, how they dwelt safely in the manner of the Sidonians, quiet and secure. And there was no rulers in the land who might put them to shame or anything. And they were far from the Sidonians, and they had no ties with anyone. Then the spies came back to their brethren at Zorah and Ashdod, and their brethren, and they said to them, what is your report? And they said, arise, let us go up against them, for we have seen the land. Indeed, it is very good. Would you do nothing? And it says, to hesitate to go, either to possess the land. When you go, you will come to a secure people, a large land, for God has given it into your hands, a place where there is no lack of anything that is in the earth. 600 men of the families of the Danites went, and the families of Zorah and Ashdod, armed with weapons of war. And they went up, and they encamped at Kirjath-Jearim, and the Judah. Therefore they called the place in the manner Dan to this day. We're in Dan. Tell Dan right now. There is a west of Kirjath-Jearim. And they passed from there to the mountains of Ephraim, and they came to the house of Micah. And the 5 men who had come to spy out the country of Lachish, answered and said to their brethren, do you know that these are the houses of an ephod? Do you know there are in these houses an ephod, a household idol, carved images and molded images? Now therefore consider what you should do. So they turned aside there, and they came to the house of the young Levite man in the house of Micah, and they greeted him. 600 men armed in their weapons of war, who were the children of Dan, stood by the entrance of the gate. And the 5 men who had gone to spy out the land went, entering there, they took the carved images, the ephod, the household idols, and the molded images. The priest stood at the entrance of the gate, and the 600 men who were armed with weapons of war. And when these went into Micah's house and took the carved images, the ephod, the household idols, and the molded images, the priest said to them, what are you doing? And they said, be quiet, put your hand over your mouth, and come with us. Be a father and a priest to us. It is better for you to be a priest in the household, or one man, or that you should be a priest and tribe, or a priest to the tribe, and a father of the family of the priests. So they stole this guy's priest. He was a priest for one guy, and they go, wouldn't it be better to come and be our priest? The tribe of Dan is making some serious mistakes, guys. They don't want what God had for them because of the Philistines. They come up here, and then they go, look, they stole some guy's priest, and they go, come on, you're going to be our priest for the whole tribe of Dan.
Get all your goodies.
Get your goodies. So 20. So the priest's heart was glad, and he took the ephod, the household idols, and the carved images, and he took this place among the people. Then they turned and they parted, and they put the little ones and livestock and the goods in front of them. And there they were a good way from the house of Micah. And the men who were in the house near Micah's house gathered together, overtook the children of Dan. And they called out to the children of Dan. So they turned aside, and they said to Micah, what ails you, that you are gathered such a company? And he said, you have taken away my gods, which I made, and the priests, and you have gone away. Now what more do I have? How can you say to me, what ails you? So the children of Dan said to him, do not let your voice be heard among us, lest angry men fall upon you, and you lose your life with the lives of your household. And the children of Dan went their way, and when Micah, they saw that they were too strong for him, and he turned and he went back to his house. So they took the things that Micah had made of the priests, and they belonged to him, and they went to Laish, that's right where we are, to a people quiet and secure, and they struck them with the edge of the sword, and they burned them with fire. There was no deliver, because it was far from Sidon, and they had no ties with anyone. It was in the valley, it belongs to Beth Rehob, and they built this city, and they dwelt there. And they called the name of the city Dan, after the name Dan, their father, who was born in Israel. However, the name of the city was formerly Lachish. And the children of Dan set up for themselves the carved images. Jonathan and the son of Gershom, the son of Manasseh, and his sons were priests in the tribes of Dan until the day of their captivity of the land. And they set up for themselves Micah's carved images, which he made all the time that the house of God was, that he made in the house of God was in Shiloh. Okay? That's how Dan got here. Okay? It's not good. Now, go to 1 Kings chapter 11, and we're going to start in verse 26. Okay? So something, you guys, to understand the Bible, it's really, I've learned this in the School of Ministry. There's two dates that are very important. One is 722 BC. Okay? 722 is when Assyria, the capital of Syria was Nineveh. Okay? Assyria came in and took out the northern kingdom. And the next date is 586 BC, is when Nebuchadnezzar, the king of Babylon, took out the southern kingdom. We're going to find out right now why the Assyrians were allowed to come in and destroy the 10 northern kingdoms. Here we go. 1 Kings chapter 11, verse 26. Solomon's servant Jeroboam, the son of Nebat, an Ephraimite from Zerata, whose mother's name was Zerah, a widow, also rebelled against the king. And this is what caused him to rebel against the king. Solomon had built the Milo and repaired the damage of the city of David his father. And the man Jeroboam was a mighty man of valor. And Solomon, seeing the young man with industrious, made him the officer over all the labor forces of his house of Joseph. Now it happened at that time when Jeroboam went up to Jerusalem that the prophet Elijah, the Shilonite, met him on the way, and he had clothed him with a new garment, and the two were alone in the field. And Ahijah took hold of the new garment, it was on him, and he tore it into the 12 pieces. And he said to Jeroboam, take for yourself 10 pieces, for thus says the Lord God of Israel, behold, I will tear the kingdom out of the hand of Solomon, and give 10 tribes to you. But he shall have one tribe for the sake of my servant David, and for the sake of Jerusalem and the city, and I have chosen out of all the tribes of Israel, because they have forsaken me and worshipped the Ashtaroth, and the goddesses of the Sidonians, the Chemoshes, and the god of the Moabites, Milcom, the god of the people of Ammon, and have not walked in my ways, to do what is right in my eyes, and to keep my statutes and my judgments, as did his father David. However, I will take the whole kingdom out of his hand, because I have made him ruler over the house of his life, for the sake of my servant David, whom I've chosen, because he's kept my commandments and my statutes. But I will take the kingdom out of his son's hands and give it to you, 10 tribes. And to his son I will give one tribe, that my servant David may always have a lamp before me in Jerusalem, the city which I have chosen for myself, to put my name there. So I will take you, and you shall reign over your heart's desire, and you shall be king over Israel. Then it shall be, if you heed all that I command you, walk in my ways, and do what is right in my eyes, and keep my statutes and my commandments, as my servant David did, then I will be with you, and build for you an enduring house, as I built David, and will give Israel to you, and I will afflict the descendants of David because of this, but not forever. Solomon therefore sought to kill Jeroboam, but Jeroboam arose and fled to Egypt, to Shishak, king of Egypt, and was in Egypt until the day of his death. Now the rest of the acts of Solomon and all that he did and the wisdom that are written in the books of the acts of Solomon, the period that Solomon reigned in Jerusalem over all of Israel was 40 years. And Solomon rested with his fathers and was buried in the city of David his father. And Rehoboam his son reigned in his place. Okay, so here's what happened. Remember, the promise came to David. And it said, David, there shall not cease to be one of your sons that sits on the throne. In other words, the Messiah is going to come through you. So the rightful heir after Solomon, David, okay, then Solomon, the next one that was supposed to be king was Rehoboam. Okay, that's who was supposed to be king. But what happened was, Jeroboam, he was the construction foreman. Remember, at the time of Solomon, it was a great time of prosperity. Because God said, even to them, that if you build my house, he says in the book of Haggai, that if you start to build my house, write that date in the calendar, and I will bless you. So remember, David couldn't build the temple. Solomon's building the temple, and as they're building the temple, it's a great time of prosperity because they're working on the house of God. And that goes for us too. So Solomon had one of his foremen, this guy named Jeroboam, who was a foreman, and he was an industrious guy, and he put him in charge of all these projects. Remember, they built the 10 cities. We were one in Megiddo, and each one of those cities provided food, or 12 cities, and each one of those cities provided food for the household of Solomon in the temple, and he's building this magnificent temple for God, and there's no wars, and it's a great time of prosperity. Okay? So, what happens is this guy comes to Jeroboam and says, hey, Jeroboam, how would you like to have 10 tribes in the north? Okay? And so, but the problem was, Rehoboam, Solomon's son, was supposed to take over the entire kingdom. So let's keep reading. And Rehoboam went to Shechem, and all the children of Israel gone to Shechem to make him king. So it happened when Jeroboam, the son of Nebat, heard it, he was still in Egypt, for he had fled from the presence of Solomon and had been dwelling in Egypt. And then they sent and called to Jeroboam, and the whole assembly of Israel came and spoke to Rehoboam, saying, for your father made our yoke our yoke heavy now, therefore lighten the burdensome service of your father and his heavy yoke which he had put on us, and we will serve you. So he said to them, depart for 3 days, and then come back to me. And the people departed. And King Rehoboam consulted the elders who stood before his father Solomon while he still lived, and he said, how do you advise me to answer these people? And they spoke to him, saying, if you will be a servant to these people today, and serve them, and answer them, and speak good words to them, then they will be your servant forever. But he rejected the advice which the elders had given him, and he consulted the younger man who had grown up with him, who stood before him. And he said to them, what advice do you give? How should we answer the people who have spoken to me, saying, lighten the yoke for which your father has put on us? And the young man who had grown up with him spoke to him, saying, thus you shall speak to the people who have spoken to you, saying, your father made your yoke heavy, but you make it lighter on us. Thus you shall say to them, my little finger shall be thicker than my father's waist. And now whereas my father put a heavy yoke on you, I will add to your yoke. My father chastised you with whips, but I will chastise you with scourges. Okay? So here's what happened. During the time of Solomon, when they were doing all this building, the people were stressed out. Okay? Because they were being taxed and they were working. It was hard. It was hard work to build this amazing temple and to build all these cities. So the people came to Rehoboam, who's Solomon's son, who's supposed to be king, and they go, look, if you serve the people, we're going to be with you. But lighten the load a little bit. We've been working here for a long time under Solomon. Lighten it up. And so he rejected the advice of these elders and the multitude of counselors their safety, and he went to one of his old friends that he grew up with, and he goes, what do you think I should do? The Bible says evil company corrupts good morals. And so he isolated himself from the elders and the wisdom and the multitude of counselors, he went to his old friend, and his friend said, I know what you can do. Tell him that I'm not only going to make it, you're telling me to lighten the yoke, I'm going to make it heavier. And so what happened is the people rebelled against Rehoboam, and this Jeroboam came back from Egypt, and he said, I'll tell you what, guys, why don't I take 10 tribes, and we'll go and start our own kingdom. And there you have the split of Israel. The Bible says a house divided cannot stand. Okay? So Rehoboam was able to stay down in the south to fulfill the prophecy down in Jerusalem. And Jeroboam took the 10 northern tribes up to Israel, and he reinstituted calf worship. And this is the altar right here where they started to worship the golden calf.
Wow.
Okay? They set up one here. This is the farthest part, the Lebanese borders right there. And they set one right up here in the far north. And then they set up another altar in Bethel, which would have been the south part of the northern kingdom. Now, the reason they did that is because they did it according to the books of Moses. They were supposed to go to Jerusalem 3 times a year to worship in the temple. And Jeroboam knew that if the people went to Jerusalem, that they might stay there and he would lose them. So he reinstituted calf worship right here so that people didn't have to go to Jerusalem and worship the true and living God. Okay? Now, why would they reinstitute calf worship? Well, as you remember, the golden calf was one of their false gods when they came out of Egypt. Remember the 10 plagues? One of them was on the cattle. Those plagues were to the false gods. And you remember when they came down out, Moses went up on Mount Sinai, and Aaron took all the gold, and they made the golden calf, and they started working around it. It was embodied in them. They knew it. It came. That was something that was an idolatrous stronghold that was in the children of Israel that the enemy used and ultimately used to take them down. So Jeroboam takes the 10 northern tribes up here, reinstitutes calf worship, and let's keep reading a little bit more. So, verse 25, right?
Yeah.
Then Jeroboam built Shechem in the mountains of Ephraim and dwelt there. Also he went out from there and built Peniel. And Jeroboam said in his heart, now the kingdom may return to the house of David. If these people go up and offer sacrifices in the house of the Lord Jerusalem, then the heart of these people will turn back to the Lord Rehoboam, king of Judah, and they will kill me and go back to Rehoboam, king of Judah. Therefore the king asked advice, made 2 calves of gold, and said to the people, it is too much for you to go to Jerusalem. Here's your gods, O Israel, which brought you up out of the land of Egypt. And he set one up in Bethel, and he set the other up in Dan. That's where we're right here. This is where the golden calf was. This is the altar. This is the brazen altar where they would sacrifice to the golden calf. Okay? And now it's interesting. Bethel was the place that Abraham first heard from the Lord. Remember, Abraham was called. He heard from the Lord. He went to Egypt. Sarah lied and said he was his sister. And then he goes, let's go back to Bethel. Bethel was the place that Jacob saw the ladders going up and down, and his name was changed to Israel. Bethel was a very significant place. That's where the father of the Jewish nation, Abraham, heard the call, was with God, and that's where Jacob's name was changed to Israel, governed by God. And it's interesting that the enemy would set up a golden calf right in Bethel. Okay?